Greetings, you've landed at the VUC, IP Communications and VoIP community. We would like to thank Simwood.com for their support. Simwood can turn you as a developer into a telco. Our hosted PBX is from onsip.com, and you can go to getonsip.com for a URL people can click to call you. We've been privileged over the last 5 years to be using the best conference bridge on the planet. Yes, I'm talking about zipdx.com, full color, full featured, full HD conference bridge. Our website, vuc.me on the webs, hosted by bluehost.com. And our worldwide local rate dial-ins are from voxbone.com. Okay, and with that absolutely brilliant introduction by some unknown voiceover guy, we turn it over to Michael for a great session with Grandstream Security and Surveillance. Pass it on.
It's a trend, isn't it? We're getting a lot of that. Yeah. Well, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. Before I introduce our guest, I would like to explain how this came about. It's actually been a couple of years that I've been thinking about not so much surveillance, but security issues, and it starts from a long-standing issue with intercoms and SIP devices at the gate, that kind of stuff. But a couple of months back, I started playing with some things that we could put around the home and office here that would let us keep an eye on, particularly the front of the property, because it's a heavily trafficked street. And there's a lot of sort of small-time, convenience, crimes of convenience, automotive break-ins, this kind of stuff. But also, I'm just digging video and have done my entire career, and so I thought this was an opportunity to play with some good stuff. So I acquired some hardware, and I was disappointed, and I sent it back. And I acquired some other hardware, and I was disappointed, and I sent it back. And I heard stories of neighbors acquiring professionally installed systems and spending a fortune. I decided there has to be a better way, and in particular, there has to be something that we can do that was going to be an intelligent, affordable surveillance capability that integrated with our SIP IP phones. And what I ended up with was several of these, which are lovely cameras by Grandstream. And so we're sort of through phase one of the installation, and we have a couple of these mounted up and a couple of other little things installed. We'll be taking a look at that shortly. And I was so tickled about this, and also by the way they integrate with the SIP phones that we have on hand, that I thought, gee, I will talk to Phil Bowers from Grandstream, and I will get Phil to tell me all about this and how it's an opportunity for the sales channel, and also for DIY folks who are a little above average, like we have on this call. So, Phil, welcome.
Thanks, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. And are you keeping warm up there?
Yeah, somehow. We're staying digged out of the snow, and more's coming, but we're doing our best.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'll give you the profile of my install, and we can sort of wind through this a little bit. I'm very DIY, and in fact, as I've been talking to neighbors about what I have done, I've been getting a lot of comments back going, oh, would you come and do mine? Or could you give me a list of equipment that I could buy, and we'll go off and do that. And I was like, okay, fine. But what I've got is just a couple of the GXV series cameras, and I've got fixed view cameras. And maybe take us through the camera line. What do you have in the way of cameras? What do they address? Different kinds are there.
Sure. So our current line of cameras, there's a pretty big focus on, I guess, the outdoor cameras. We've recently kind of not switched up, but updated our line. Pretty much 5 major cameras in our line right now. All of them are SIP-based cameras, as you talked about. One of the great reasons why our cameras can integrate so closely with not just our SIP telephony, but almost any SIP telephony, is because these cameras run almost the same SIP stack that the phones do. So it just allows you to communicate with the PBX, communicate with any SIP endpoint. So primarily now we have 5 different cameras. They range in terms of In terms of the millimeter spec, which, as you know, will generally tell you what field of view or what angle you're going to be viewing. For the cameras are weatherproof certified cameras, which means that they are built with weatherproof casing. There's actually a certification for that. We have a variety of cameras that actually have SD card slots built into it to allow you to create local recording solution like we were talking about yesterday. Infrared cameras as well, a couple of variable focal cameras which allows you to adjust the lens, obviously, in case you might be moving it around or to allow it to fit what you're doing. And then kind of to complete that whole thing, as you know, we came out with our GVR 3550 network video recorder back in November, just to kind of create that full surveillance solution, give you a dedicated solution to record and monitor those cameras from.
Now it's interesting. You mentioned a couple of things there, and so I want to give a little bit of insight to folks who may not be intimate with all of this. One of the things about the cameras, this is my MO. I buy something, I play with it. If I like it, I keep it. I talk about it. I encourage others to use it. If I don't like it, I don't talk about it. I just send it back. But I will say, when you go and you look at the Best Buys of the world and the Fry's and the Micro Centers and all the places that the DIY kind of folks are going to be able to go, they're going to find things by Talos and Swan, and these are, or even if you're going to Lowe's and Home Depot and these kinds of places, because they oftentimes have something like this, but these guys are in at least what they're promoting. Because I saw a promotion just recently at Best Buy that was like an 8-camera system with an NVR, but it was technology that I could see was 20 years old. I mean, this was cameras that were, if you see a camera that's quoted in something called TV lines or TVL, and they'll say, oh, it's 600 TVL or 700 TVL or something like that. Well, what people don't necessarily understand is it's an analog camera that has a coaxial line that gets fed off to whatever its little recorder is. And so this is, at 700 TV lines, it's something just less than standard def TV circa 2000.
Yep.
Which I thought was pretty cheesy in this day and age when my smartphone can do 1080p video, why wouldn't my surveillance system be capable of doing something a little better? So that was the part that kind of confused me, and that's at the DIY end. Now, when you go up beyond that, you get into things where, okay, it's not do-it-yourself, it's channel-based. So you're then relying upon a value-added reseller or a security specialist to come in and help you with all of that. And so I'm going to try and do this, and I hope I'm going to pull it off, but we'll see. What I ended up doing, oh, that's not good, is it? Hang on, we'll try that again. I'll be right back. Or not.
Dangerous demos.
Yes.
Part 1.
Trying to make one computer do more things than it's really comfortable doing. Just a second, we'll do this a different way. It's a web share. We're doing a web share. And then we'll bring the camera back. So what I ended up doing was getting some measurements of my property, figuring out what I wanted to cover. Now on the left side there is the street side of the property, and the right side is the back end of the property. And I wanted to figure out what was a minimum kind of sensible thing that I needed to keep an eye on the places I wanted to keep an eye on. In particular, in the front here, the cars are always parked out here. And so I ordered 2 cameras. I ordered one with a 3.6 millimeter lens and one with an 8 millimeter lens to try and figure out what was the geometry that was going to cover that. And I discovered 2 cameras with 3.6 millimeter lenses covers the 90-foot distance across the front of our property, which was, okay, pretty cool, I thought. And then I decided, okay, well, looking in the back, I could put another wide-angle camera over here. My office is actually back in the garage here, and another, the narrow field camera looking down a longer channel there. Are there any other, channel camera geometries involved, or tell us where? This is residential, obviously.
Sure.
In a business application, where do pan tilt zooms and variable geometry lenses, zoom lenses, and this kind of stuff come into play? Because it's kind of beyond the scope of what I'm doing, but you must see that in use over time.
Yeah, so I mean, to be completely honest with you, we actually don't do any PTZ cameras. I think the one thing you'll see and the one thing that we've found is as soon as you put a PTZ engine or motor in a camera, it almost doubles the price of the camera, triples even. So I mean, honestly, primarily for a business application, what you'd be looking at in terms of angles and whatnot is very similar to what the example you just showed. You know, I always kind of explain it to people. That millimeter lens specification really tells you everything you're going to need to know pretty much in terms of what it's going to be able to view. Obviously, the lower end of the spectrum, I'll say anything 2 to 4 to 5 millimeters, somewhere in there, is going to be wider angle, closer to the camera like you just showed, and anything, we'll say 8 millimeters plus. I believe we go up to 12 millimeters is more for distance, a parking lot, a driveway like you just showed.
A hallway kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. A larger indoor area, whatnot.
Okay. So in my perspective, well, I really, and because we've done things with Logitech before, and I really do like PTZ cameras as a production tool if I'm doing a video project. But in my mind, from a surveillance perspective, PTZ means you've got somebody monitoring it, and they have a need to, in a live context, move the camera around, change the field, and that was not what I was going to have. But the other thing that I think was interesting was the ability. I mean, I think in the old days, the cameras have motion activation, so they can invoke a recording capability.
Absolutely.
And so you see some movement. My Labrador walks across the front yard. It starts recording. But I think what was very intriguing was this idea that hard drives are so big now, and video comparatively small in terms of the amount of data H.264 presents.
Sure.
That we could, with a 2 gigabyte hard drive, we could literally record 24/7 those two cameras across the front and hold 3 weeks worth of continuous storage.
Wow.
And just sort of cycle through that. And is that common in a business application? What do people often do? What do you see deployed in the way of recording and
sure.
that sort of thing?
It's a lot of, honestly, again, kind of what you just explained, where you know, specifically the channels and the resellers we deal with generally are selling into small, medium-sized businesses, companies that don't have a full-time security guy or that don't, you know, bring in Tyco or anybody to, you know, do a $100,000 surveillance installation. So a lot of it is the motion detection, quite honestly. And, you know, our cameras offer, for each camera, 16 different motion detection areas. Each area can have a different sensitivity, so you can literally have it set for if you want it, if a leaf blows by and you want it to go off because of that, it can, or if you want it to only do when, you know, motion occurs for a couple of seconds in front of the camera. So we definitely find it's generally that, and then and which is why we kind of followed up with that NVR, that a lot of these SMBs were looking to have these videos recorded, whether it be to a server on their network or a PC on their network. And it was actually easier for them to kind of put this NVR in, have it separate from that server, that computer network, and just tap it right into your IP network without having to connect the cameras directly to it. Which is another thing, great thing about SIP cameras, is that you can utilize the existing infrastructure you already have. If you have a full IP network for your phones, you have all of the infrastructure you need for IP surveillance as well.
You know, and I think one of the things that people said to me is I would really, because they were, you know, here again, I'm in a residential application and I'm looking at a DIY approach. A lot of people were saying, I really want wireless cameras because I don't want to go crawling through the attic and pulling cables and stuff like that. But in reality, even the wireless cameras that I've seen, and we actually had a little Lorex system for a while, they're wireless to the extent that the video maybe goes over
Absolutely.
a wireless link, but you still have to pull power to that camera location.
Yes, so if you're going to put power there, you might as well. I mean, all of our cameras are PoE also, so there you go. One cable for power and for a connection.
Exactly, and being Ethernet connected, it didn't involve, and the term I've only come to understand recently, Siamese cabling, which is a coaxial cable that's bonded to a power cable so that they can deliver power control and take the video back over the coax, which is how the analog cameras generally work. I thought that was kind of obtuse. because you're using a sort of a custom dedicated cable now. You might have saved a few dollars on the cameras to go with analog cameras, but you have a more proprietary installation.
Absolutely.
So,
but at least it's not a three-way Siamese camera where you have the serial connection for the PZT as well.
That can happen.
Yeah, I've seen that. I have a question about the PoE though. Is it passive PoE or is it 802.3 AF PoE?
It's the second one, right? It's the 802.3 AF PoE.
In my case, I just bought a little 8-port PoE switch, and I switched out a switch that's in the center of our house where our network cabling is in the closet there, so that I can have 8 cameras around the house if I want, and that'll get sort of backhauled back underground to the garage. I have a question about types of cameras. Now, these are what you call bullet cameras.
Sure.
And they are sort of fixed position. They're quite adaptable, though, and the video from them is startlingly good, and I'm going to take the opportunity here to show you. And in this particular case, because I'm hooked up for it, I'm going to show using one of your 3275 cameras, or not cameras, phones. While I'm doing this, could you tell us about the phone?
Yeah, so what you're looking at here is a live feed of Michael's GXV 3275. I'm sure most of you primarily know us for the IP telephony endpoint. That's historically what our market has been. That's kind of where we got to be where we are today, and now we've moved into more different communication solutions. But anyway, so that phone is an Android-based IP phone. It is basically, the way that I describe it, it's an Android tablet with a 6-line IP phone connected to it. It has a camera built into it. It's got a full web browser. It's got full access to the Google Play Store, so you can download, Skype, Microsoft Link. Michael showed us before. He actually could attend this webinar on Google Hangouts running on that phone. Really just, kind of combines a lot of different things, kind of takes a lot of the popularity of the, bring your own device to work in terms of using apps that you may be familiar with, kind of puts that on your IP phone. And one of the best things about it in terms of security is that it's able to, as long as the cameras are registered as an extension on a PBX, you can extension dial the cameras at any point in time to see their live feed. The cameras, when motion is detected, for example, can make a live video call to any of those video phones. You'd see right there on the screen. We can get into this a little bit later. It's also great for door access solutions, things like that.
Sure. Now, one of the things that I've noted, and I think this is fabulous, in fact, is when you look at that, and if I try to reach out to my other camera, let's say here, I've got several speed dials, one for the VUC, one for our gate phone, which is an Algo Solutions thing. Pat Byrne, we love you, man. That's an awesome product. And we'll try this other camera. When you actually see the video come up from this camera, this is not the 720p video. It's definitely not. That camera might be a little grumpy in that regard. The other one. This is not the 720p video that we're actually capturing to our recorder. The cameras have the ability to sustain, if you think about them as being servers, they have the ability to sustain 2 HD streams. So 2 proper HD streams to, say, to a network video recorder and to a web-based client. Sure. And then they also have a secondary video stream, which can be something lesser resolution. So I have been using, sorry, you're seeing me in a little tiny window over there. I have been using an inexpensive Android app on my Nexus tablet to check the cameras from the phone. Sure. And so if somebody rings our gate phone and I'm in the house and my wife answers on the phone, I can in just a second actually call up the camera views on this Android app. But I'm not using the high bandwidth connection, which means the connections are faster. And I think that's just lovely, the way you can have these sort of parallel infrastructures of IP video to a recorder and then the SIP beside that. That's great.
Absolutely.
So how do these work with your PBXs? We know they work with the phones because we're seeing that. How do they work with the PBXs?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, these cameras basically have the same or similar SIP stacks as our phones do. Therefore, you can configure these to a PBX, give it an extension the same way that you would a phone. And simply put, when you do that, it just allows you to, make some of our cameras, actually some other features I'll get into. So, for example, some of the cameras have actually have a built-in microphone and speaker on the camera. Some of them, and then all the rest of them will have audio in or audio output to speakers, intercoms, what have you. So you could pick up, even if it's just a voice phone, call one of these cameras, and basically use the camera as an intercom. You could obviously do that with video too, and it's not just a voice intercom; it's a voice and video intercom. We see that pretty popularly around like the back door entrance to somebody's warehouse. So it just automatically, you can call that and see what's going on there at any point in time. What else?
There we go.
Oh yeah, so there's the zero config feature, which our PBX supports, which basically just allows you to add these cameras to it and any phone or any device as well, and really just allow the PBX, if you wanted to give everything its own extension, kind of apply general set of rules to a larger group of extensions, whether they be cameras or whatnot. And in that way, the PBX simply is kind of like the anchor of that communication between the cameras and any other SIP endpoint, whether it be a SIP video phone or a SIP voice phone or whatnot.
Yeah, it's worth noting that the cameras that I have here, these 3275s, you can see they have a fan-out cable like so. Sure. This, by the way, was the most difficult thing about the installation. Is that hang on, I'll go back to something simple. The plug, the Ethernet plug for this thing, you got to drill a pretty big hole to actually pull that through a wall. It's like an inch or an inch and an eighth you have to drill to pull that through. Sure. But other than that, they were dead simple to install, and they do have power and separate audio. So what kind of audio devices? I mean, I haven't done this yet. So what kind of audio devices would I plug into this? Because it's like audio in, audio out. But if you have the camera mounted high, as we do, there's not a lot of point in that. What do you see people using generally?
I mean, I'll be honest. It's not a massive, overwhelming use of the audio in, audio out. It's mostly the speakers for the intercom kind of solution, like I just talked about. Mostly just connecting it to a speaker that may be there. If you are moving over from an analog system, a lot of those older analog systems have speakers and intercoms and whatnot around them. So just to be able to integrate it with that, just to use a third-party outside speaker.
Okay. Now I started out. The cameras come with a CD that has some software that's called G-Surf Pro or GS-Surf Pro. And I used that at first. I just took a utility PC and I put that software on there, and it's basically an entirely software approach to recording the video. Sure. And that was great, except my utility PC was drawing 600 watts, and it was not the kind of thing where I wanted to put it in my network closet, and I had to leave a monitor on it and all of that. And so what we're looking at here on my video now is the web interface to your NVR. Now, this is a new product, isn't it?
Yeah, we came out with it in November of last year, so yeah, it's still relatively new.
And what can you tell us about it? I'm going to try and dial up the resolution of what I'm showing here so we can... There we go. Sure. Now you're... Yes. Because, I'm actually looking at the actual thing, and you can see all the status, and... It's a 1U box. It's DIY, but you got to be a little bit handy because you have to take the lid off, put some hard drives into it. But I'm not kidding. It took me less than an hour to get it configured, to open it up, put the 2 hard drives in, boot it, and away it went. And then as I'm sure you saw, adding the cameras to it is literally just searching for cameras on your network, clicking next to the box next to those cameras, and it automatically right away adds it right to here. And then you set up recording or whatever schedule you want for that. So kind of scheduling I haven't got into. Right now they're just set to record everything all the time. So there's no particular
and honestly, that's what a lot of people are using them for anyway. It's just 24/7 recording.
This thing is actually remarkably inexpensive. Could you tell us something about its capabilities in the larger install?
Yeah, so one of the way that we kind of talk about it is it's it's a very simple, easy to install NVR with actually for its class it supports more hard drives and more storage capacity than any NVR in the small to medium sized business class. Does up to 24 cameras in terms of the hard drive support. As you mentioned, it does not come with hard drives. We have a list of recommended hard drives that we've actually tested on our website. It can support up to four 4-terabyte hard drives, so that's 16 terabytes total. I mean, you mentioned before that you were able to, through 2 cameras, I believe, record for with just a couple of gigs. So this can support a lot more in terms of the storage capacity. Can do up to 24 cameras. What else we got here? The RAID 0 and the RAID 1, I think you mentioned you were using RAID 1. You have the option to use either or, kind of, to specify, what's more important to you in terms of redundancy or backup. It supports all of our cameras. It supports any third-party ONVIF compliant. ONVIF is kind of a video surveillance standard out there on the market. Supports any third-party ONVIF cameras as well. Just basically it's a dedicated recording, dedicated recording and monitoring solution. You see there on the screen, has full support for the H.264 codec. So a lot of, really powerful box, and it retails, I believe, for about $279, $289. Again, there's no hard drives installed yet. Those are, as you mentioned earlier, the price of data storage is becoming so cheap anymore that, hard drives don't cost nearly what they used to. So for a couple $100 here, you can, put in a full solution with a couple of cameras that can, with this NVR to monitor and record all of them 24/7.
Is there any facility within this to offload the media if you wanted to have some off-site backup, an FTP service or something like that?
Sure. There's some, I'll be honest, somewhere within this there's a ability to back it up to FTP server, HTTPS, or to believe to offload it to other servers that might be on your network. I'll be completely honest, I'm not sure within the user interface exactly where that is.
Yeah, neither am I. It's not something I've ever done.
Yeah, Michael, you're asking my questions. How dare you?
Well, I'm sorry. But you can see here I've got a RAID 1 stripe with 2 terabytes of space. It's been running since, let's say, Saturday, and it's used about 400 gig of space. 2 terabytes, my experience is I can store these 2 cameras at 720p 24/7 for about 3 weeks. And that's as much as ever I need. Incidentally, since we installed this, we have already, I'll come back to some normal video here. We have already identified somebody who perpetrated an evil deed on the street in front of our house. Somebody drove past and clipped a mirror off our neighbor's truck, and we were able to identify the plate on the truck and have it addressed. So that was kind of handy.
Cool.
Anyway, returning to cameras for a second, could you tell me, and I started to go down this path earlier, why somebody would use a dome camera versus a bullet camera, or one of your like box cameras? Because
sure.
I don't get that.
You know what? I think it has as much to do with the location that you're putting it in, what the infrastructure. I'll find usually that a dome camera is going to go directly on a ceiling. A bullet camera is going to go on a wall rather than being put on the ceiling. It really, at least in my opinion, has more to do with where you're putting them and the visual look of the camera with the surroundings. And obviously, the ability to with the dome ones, does it get a little bit of a wider angle? Yeah, it gets a little bit of a wider angle with the dome cameras. So, for example, like an entrance to something you're going to want to monitor a little bit wider angle, dome camera is good for that. You don't honestly lose all that much by using, if you had a dome camera and a bullet camera at about the same millimeter spec, not going to lose all that much in terms of how wide the angle is, but one advantage.
Yeah, I mean, my approach was experimental, was to get a couple of different cameras and see what happened. But I guess not having a ceiling-mounted situation, I didn't see the dome cameras as being appropriate. But then
Exactly.
literally a couple weeks later, my neighbor had his system installed, which is done by a contractor, and he's got wall-mounted dome cameras, which I thought, okay,
Huh.
it's
I don't think that's the point of them, but okay, that's fine.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know he paid. He had a 4-camera system put in with an NVR and paid literally about 5 times what we've got invested in ours. Now, some of that is the service of having it installed, I'm sure, which is fine. Okay, here's a tough question, maybe. When people do this, what kind of common problems do they have when they're speccing out these sorts of things? Or if you have 24 cameras, that's a lot of cameras, and the NVR can handle that, which is kind of awesome. But what kind of pitfalls do you see people running into? Is it like not using a weatherproof camera in someplace that ends up being weather exposed, or I don't know?
Yeah.
Feeling.
So honestly, I think the first thing is bandwidth, and that obviously has much to do with your network capability or the connection that you have. Especially if you're using an older non-gigabit network that can, or non-gigabit PoE switches or what have you, that can affect it. Bandwidth is certainly probably the largest thing that you'll see in terms of that. I'm just thinking over.
Is gigabit really a factor, or I mean, it's probably a question of scale. It's not something I'm seeing at the moment. I'm not plugged into gigabit, but I only have 2 cameras.
Yeah, exactly. So like a larger business network, like our office here in Boston, with we have 35, 40 people on phone lines on the same network. So bandwidth would definitely be more important for somebody like us than for a home user, or even a 4 or 5 person home office or a smaller office.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I'm
surprised. Somebody just it's another thing to follow up on with that was somebody just little estimation that we have that, for example, 20 cameras running at 1080p HD could run you up to 100 megs. So obviously your internet there would need to be able to support that, or your network.
Yeah, your network. I mean, I think when we're talking about network infrastructure like this, one of the things that I had to drill home to a couple of people who I was talking about is it's really important that your switches, if you're using PoE, your switches be on UPSs, and that the NVR be on your UPS, and that things just don't go to heck when you have a power line bump.
Absolutely.
And that sort of thing, which I think is quite good. The other thing is, some people were talking to me about things like, because we get a lot of people. There's a lot of brand awareness, right, in the world,
Sure.
And people are saying, "Well, I'm just going to put in 4 drop cams."
Sure.
Drop cams are cool, and I'm like, "Wow, 4 drop cams. One, they're Wi-Fi only, and then they need a couple of megabits each. And what kind of internet connection do you have at that site? And you're going to soak up all that bandwidth,
Exactly.
And they only record to their cloud service." It's kind of funny. Dropcam is great for keeping an eye. It's like a baby monitor, right?
1 or 2 cameras.
Yeah. And there are a variety of things like that were so cloud-based and tied to other things. Honestly, these things look as good as some of the production cameras I've worked on years back, so I'm quite impressed.
Question in IRC from Daniel, by the way, about the capability of TLS SRTP encryption.
Sure. Yeah. All of our cameras have full support for SIP over TLS and SRTP.
Okay, that was easy.
Yeah.
And what about sort of a multi-stream capability? Like I have some cameras where you can basically go to it from a URL. Just so you punch in a URL, and there's like 15 to choose from, and each one is a different bit rate, frame rate, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure it's just a little servlet on the camera where it will, you pass it some parameters essentially and serve up a stream of that size. So my question is, can they also be used in that way? In other words, like outside of the realm of SIP, where you're signaling them with SIP. If, for example, you wanted to just use a camera management system that is just expecting to query for a stream via
Sure.
HTTP?
Sure, good question. I'm actually going to bring in Sean Riley, our partner, global partner marketing manager, who's going to be able to answer that question a little bit better than I would.
And Carl, I will show you one of the camera's user interfaces, because you just go to the camera directly. This is what you're going to see. Just a second. It'll take me a second to dial the resolution up. Going between sources. This is the web interface for one of the cameras directly. So if you just point Firefox,
Michael, it'll take me a minute to get there. I'm on my mobile phone.
Okay, no
I'm
problem.
not on the IRC. I'll speak up when I'm back on my PC.
Okay. Carry on. You were going to address what he was saying.
Good.
Yeah, so just to kind of briefly answer, so for home users to be able to dial in, obviously you can do it a number of different ways. If you have a home PBX, it's simply just connecting to that and then the extension. But in terms of the physical address, if you have a static IP at home, obviously you can just directly connect to it that way through username and password. Otherwise, we actually support, and you can actually see on our camera UI, the ability to use a DDNS service and have it redirect directly to your camera that way as well.
I see. And as far as but I think you're saying that yes, you can just use a browser, and a browser will and it will serve up either a stream or a series of JPEGs to a browser for the asking.
Yes, absolutely. So browser,
irrespective of how you get there, whether you're getting there via VPN or on the LAN or via NAT, via static IP, DNS, so on.
Exactly.
Now, I have been using this little app on my Android tablets because people were asking about remote monitoring, and that wasn't something that I was particularly interested in, that is, paying somebody to monitor it. But there's this Android app called TinyCam Pro,
Sure.
which is like $5, and it does on Android. Sorry, I haven't got my tablet hooked up to be able to see its video, but this is. Let's see if we can get that there. You can kind of see the two cameras being monitored on my tablet, right, just over my local Wi-Fi. And so all I do is I have a VPN client on my tablet. I VPN connect to the house, and if I'm out away from the house, I just VPN connect back to the house and pull this up, and away it goes.
Sure.
That's maybe a little more DIY, the VPN part, than some people would be willing to put up with, but it's fine in my case. I'd rather have that than be beholden to some Dropcam cloud service that I don't know anything about. So. And
as a little bit of a teaser, we're actually coming out with our own Grandstream branded app to do exactly what you just showed, to be able to view your cameras remotely on a smartphone, tablet, what have you.
Is that related to the Wave?
It's kind of related to the Wave a little bit, yeah. I mean, obviously.
You want to tell people about the Wave, because the Wave is new.
Sure, yeah. Grandstream Wave is a free Android soft phone application that we launched last week. It is, again, it's completely free. And it supports up to 6 SIP accounts. It can do up to 6-way voice conferencing. It has, full PBX integration in terms of speed dial, BLF. And again, it's a free soft phone application for Android. By the end of the year, we're looking to also release it for iOS as well. And there you go. He's got it running.
Yeah. Free soft phones are very popular in these circles.
Yeah, I would imagine. Any kind of free app.
And it looks surprisingly familiar. It looks like I may know the people who are behind it. So.
Another question from Daniel, if you will. Can the camera send an instant message instead of initiating a call when detecting motion? Could be more friendly notification towards mobile devices than decide to call back if you see what happens. Was that clear? I kind of
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Sean, tell me if I'm wrong. I think the best option in terms of that is our cameras can actually send email screenshots to up to 3 different email addresses when motion is detected. And you could, get that email on your cell phone or on your tablet. I think that would probably be your best option there.
Yeah, much better than SMS.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, if you have a PBX configured for either your home office, or your small business. You also have the ability through the PBX to actually set up an external call. So again, you could make a call through your mobile client that is still connected at home, and now all of a sudden, rather than getting text or email you, all of a sudden you have an incoming video feed on your smartphone at home to see whatever the motion is at your office.
So here's what I have set up. If you can see my video, I have 2 motion zones that correspond to the sidewalk on this particular camera. And I need to play with the sensitivity. It's not quite right yet. But then you can record video on motion detection, or you can send a voice alarm to the SIP phone, or upload to the alarm center, which is the NVR. Yep. Honestly, I'm doing that just because I'm tracking for a certain kind of behavior, and it just gives me a list in the database of all the different, every time that alarm has been triggered, so that I can then go in the recorded video to those points and look for what I'm looking for. Upload an alarm to a web server, or upload video to an FTP server, that sort of thing. And then you can have that all on a schedule. And these params, right, this is how the params are set on the camera's web interface itself. Yep. But they're equally applicable to the recorder's capability. So you can do, now, does that, and help me here, does that mean that I can set parameters of the camera from the NVR, or does the NVR have its own capabilities that are separate?
I believe it's separate, right? Yeah. I mean, the one thing I think we added the ability to set motion detection for each camera through the NVR. But in terms of everything else, it's through the camera.
We did, and the reason we have some redundancy there and this overlap where you can choose it on the NVR as well as the camera is that although we hope and obviously design our NVR to work very well with our own cameras, we recognize that not everyone's going to be using Grandstream cameras. They'll use other on-SIP or on-VIF cameras, and as a result, we're designing for the spec. So in case there isn't this feature set available on another camera, we can actually control it from the NVR. Obviously, all Grandstream cameras have that functionality that you can dial directly into the camera as well, but this gives a redundancy in case you don't have that.
Sure. Let's take a look for a second at nighttime capability. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so my question is whether your cameras have provision for inputs and outputs. Like, for example, if I had some external event that I wanted to signal to the camera to either, take a picture, send a notification, upload, do something special based on an external event, whether that's a pressure sensor or something other, so some dry contact loop, whatever, contact closure. And also, sort of inversely, is there a way to fire a trigger using the camera? So, for example, if I had a door opener or or something,
or a taser.
So specifically with the SIP door opener, we actually, within that user interface, all of the cameras do have support for SIP door openers, which could lead us transition us into the whole how to use these cameras in the video phones for door or facility access solution. In terms of some of the other things that you mentioned, and tell me, Sean, add on to this. Some of the cameras do have this one we don't. This one here does not have it, but do have alarm input and alarm output with these audio and with the network cable, so you can connect it through those cables and then go into the user interface for the camera to kind of tell the camera what to do when that third-party motion sensor or whatever you're using tells the camera that something has gone off.
Okay.
I just brought up some recorded video from overnight. It kind of indicates what the nighttime capability is.
Sure.
There's a street light out in front of our house, but this is pretty plain as day. I've also got it running at about 8 times speed, which I find recording the video and having the video on hand, okay, that's a problem solved. Tracking through hours of video to find the event that you want, that's still tedious. If you guys can do anything about that, maybe
we'll see what we can do.
A partnership with IBM for their Watson or something like that. But anyhow, let's ask for questions from the amassed audience. We still have 11 in the audio world, and I've about run out of
question
questions.
Naturally.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so this is the perfect question to ask with Michael on the call, because he's like the one guy who understands concepts like this, at least one guy I know. So, you know, there's a lot of cameras that, like, I'm thinking specifically of, what's the name of that company now? Ubiquity Networks. They have these so-called high definition cameras that are quote unquote 720 lines, and they are 720 lines, but they're 720 lines based on, you know, 4 lines, like interpolated up from 4 or something crappy. I'm trying to be funny, but the point is that they suck. They were just terrible. I mean, I think, like, who decided that this is HD? You know, I mean, they should have divided it up into 4,000 lines, or they should have called it 4K by interpolating further, right? Still only $99, right? So the question is, you know, how good are the image sensors, and how? I mean, I know you guys were showing some pictures, which unfortunately it's tough to evaluate from here, because you don't ever know, you know, why something may not look as good as it could, you know, so whether that's the best it can do, or whether there's, you know, some recoding or something like that that's happening. But the point is, like, you know, how does a consumer know to differentiate what sounds like it might be a better image sensor in your, you know, $100 camera than, say, the Ubiquity Networks $100 camera?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and it's not just, you know, Ubiquity. I mean, anybody out there, you know, earlier Michael was talking about you know, the cameras that you can buy at Target, Home Depot, things like that. I've seen analog camera systems advertised having HD camera capability running through a coax to a 480p analog recorder. So, I mean, you know, the buzzwords that are thrown out there that are trying to confuse, I think, you know, the average public is unfortunately certainly there. To answer your question about our camera, I believe, you know, our image sensor has been, the image sensors that we use in our various cameras have been great. We do direct to H.264 encoding, so it's not up-converted. A lot of cheaper cameras will also use H.263, which, again, the reason they're using it is because it's obviously not as bandwidth efficient, right? So you might be buying a cheaper camera that says, oh, I can do 720p or even 1080p recording, but now my file size is, you know, double what it would be with an H.264 record or encode. But in terms of the image quality itself, I mean, you know, unfortunately, for those on audio, I apologize you're not able to kind of see the video feeds that Michael's been showing, but I think they truly show, especially in an IR environment. When it's an overnight, you're looking directly at, you know, what our IR light is providing and how high definition the image is. You know, a lot of people will also say, when they talk to us or kind of ask us about our cameras, why does someone even need an HD or an FHD camera if all I'm doing is covering, you know, a 30 feet area? And the simple answer is, you know, as Michael showed in the camera that showed the street, is, you know, you're not looking at something at 100% all the time, right? I mean, it's the ability to zoom in and get a license plate from 40 feet away, that if you're looking at an analog camera, that's it. You're never going to get that. You know, at best, maybe you'll get a partial image of someone's face, but with an HD, FHD, the ability to zoom in, you know, to really enhance at magnification. And that, you know, is something that we constantly love getting feedback back from our resellers and our end users, you know, hearing that our cameras were able to assist in an event that they had, and were the reason they were able to pull a license plate or, you know, grab somebody's face from a burglary, something like that.
I will say I've seen some really misleading stuff, and I accept that I'm because I've been working with a project of this sort for the last month or so. I'm a little more suspect and looking for it. But I've seen some like Tiger Direct promotional emails recently that said, blah blah blah, HD. Well, and in fact, what it was 700 TVL cameras connected to an HD capable NVR. So they're standard def cameras with an analog collection to an NVR that would accept connections from HD cameras. But it's really if you're a DIY homeowner or small business operator, it's really confusing to say, why does the video not look HD? My NVR is an HD NVR, but you're not feeding it HD signals because you bought the bundle because it was cheap, right? And in fact, if you roll that back and compare apples to apples, the Grandstream NVR and the Grandstream cameras are a really good value compared to some of these things that you see offered by these online vendors, which are, the price performance just isn't the same, is what I'm getting at. So there you go. That's as much of a testimonial as I ever give. So.
Well, we appreciate it.
Further questions from the audience as we are at 10 till the hour. And yeah, this is overnight from the south camera, or no, the north camera rather.
Tim was asking if you've seen sighthound.com.
I have not. What is that?
Actually,
Nor have we.
You haven't? Tim has to tell us in IRC. He says his audio is weird. You have to tell us. So he's looking uncomfortable, and I'm not hearing him.
I have deliberately been, by the way, putting a lot of live video in instead of me or in addition to me, so that when people go back and look at this, when they're watching the YouTube video, they'll have some very visual clues as to what we were talking about. But it's February in South Texas, people, and the garden is not yet blooming. In fact, it's in need of some maintenance. So that's why it is what it is.
Tell you what we could do is I can try to get this and then share my screen so that you guys can know what he's talking about. I'll do that in 1 second. Okay, we're almost there. That looks like this, right? So we're watching a commercial for Sighthound, but
yeah, you almost missed the most exciting thing that happened there.
Well, it'll come back, I'm sure.
Drove past.
Oh, it's like Person of Interest, if you've seen the...
Oh, wow.
No.
Look at that. Oh, wait.
Michael, if we do this again, you're going to have to move houses so that you live in a more exciting area.
Actually, our neighborhood, when we moved here 15 years ago, it was quote-unquote up and coming. Now it's frightful, just the way property values have changed and such like, and seriously, the neighborhood association has expressed a bunch of interest in maybe having a seminar put on about some DIY home surveillance, simply because, you know, there's more traffic on the streets, there's more passers-by, there's more crimes of convenience being committed, which tends to be, you know, vehicular break-ins and
Sure.
and minor little things like that. But you know, if I were running a wine shop, because that would be the kind of thing I would do, I would definitely need to have the place covered, right? And I'd need the back room storage area covered. And in fact, my niece is opening in Sugar Land, Texas next month a dance studio, and we're going to end up with probably a half a dozen of your dome cameras and an NVR in there, because it's a whole lot more cost effective to do that than really any other thing we can think of, and also achieve meaningful performance. So,
Sure.
And her husband is a Cisco network engineer, so that's kind of saying something.
Nice.
But anyhow, further questions before we wind this down, folks, or have we missed anything? What have we left out? What haven't you told us?
What haven't we told you? I think we covered pretty much anything. Anything that you can think of?
No, I guess the only thing that I would add, just coming in and hearing kind of about PTZ, one of the things that I think is interesting in terms of PTZ versus, you know, our cameras being non-PTZ, are that if you look at the cost structure and the breakdown, PTZ a decade ago was, you know, typically hotels, right?
Really hard to understand you. I don't know why it's so. You're like really
Yeah,
echoey.
there's been some
He's off mic.
Weird, yeah.
Soft mic. Is that better?
It goes on and off, and right now it's off.
The echo cancellation doesn't like that perspective for some reason.
Yeah, it's a phase thing.
Yeah, you just have to get closer to the microphone.
Will do. Okay. Hopefully this is better.
Yeah, it's fine.
Excellent.
Better.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right. So the difference between PTZ, 10 years ago, PTZ was readily used by hotels, office buildings that would have someone actively looking around, right? And the benefit there was that you only need one camera for a large area. The downside was you only caught what that person was zooming around and looking at. And the cost of the PTZ camera was very high. Since costs have kind of slid, especially in the HD lens and imaging sensors, from our perspective, the benefit of having stationary HD cameras that can overlap and still cost significantly less than one camera that's only going to catch whatever that user wants, from an archival standpoint, from an NVR standpoint, is significantly better, right? Because if something happens, better than making a security person being effectively your director of whatever's going on in terms of your camera angle, and having different stationary camera angles in HD overlapping in coverage. And again, the cost benefit nowadays, for the most part, justifies why you would overlap cameras and still be able to save thousands of dollars on an office deployment.
If you're actually looking at my video right at the moment, this is kind of what I've done, because you can see my mouse cursor, I guess. Right here is the that's that crepe myrtle, and that's that crepe myrtle right there. So we've got a little bit of overlap in the fields of view, and you see a car going by. You don't lose the car between the shots. It flows smoothly from the shots. But I do also appreciate that we tend to think about these sorts of things, and certainly you guys do. It's your business. Your average small business owner needs some help, and so I can see a big opportunity for the company that's going in and selling them phones or a small PBX or something to add this to their bag of tricks.
Absolutely.
Have a more complete solution, and because they're not a dedicated security company, they're not going in and having to make it a big project. It's just another layer on the project they're maybe already doing.
Absolutely.
So that's the challenge to those of you guys out there in VAR land.
As you said, it just gives you the ability to sell, as a reseller, to sell more to your customers. A lot of times, historically, your telephony guy and your surveillance guy are two different people. They work on different networks, and now, as a telephony guy, and historically our resellers are on the telephony side of things, you can now add a full surveillance solution, same network infrastructure, same setup, all still going to the same PBX. Just a value add.
Sweet. It's an opportunity, people.
They call me one last question, Carl. And, I do have a number of last questions. So, but let me ask this. So earlier, Michael mentioned something about a particular online kind of hosted solution. I can't remember what you called it, but you were calling that out as being a clunky solution with, I can't remember the name that you mentioned, Michael, but it was like some like
Ubiquity.
Drop camera, the big players in these little Wi-Fi cameras that have no local storage, and they must stream to their cloud service, and you actually pay a monthly subscription fee for their cloud service.
Right, and when I hear that, I think, damn it, why didn't I think of that and do that first, right? Because here's the thing, right? I've seen this business model play out 1,000,000 times, and it's a horrible decision. But it's like to buy something like that when things like this Grandstream solution are available, or say even that Ubiquity solution is available. But it's really interesting to me to observe how people see things in terms, how purchasers and decision makers who are going to pull the trigger on a purchase of this or something else, how they make a decision based on what seems accessible to them. So they might get a bunch of drop cams because they think, I can get a bunch of drop cams and stick one here, 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 and then I'll just like open up that app. And I do know how to get apps. I do know how to plug things in. I could probably sticky tape this to the ceiling, or what I mean. So so people make all kinds of stupid architectural decisions because they are limited by the tools that they know. Another great example, a friend of mine runs like an Airbnb, and he basically bought 3 Comcast subscriptions for each of the floors and bought an Apple Airport for each of the floors. And I thought, ay, that's a total kludge and unnecessarily expensive, and Jesus, like, why didn't you call me first? And then it occurred to me, like, oh no, that's actually a pretty good solution for him, because if he does what I tell him to do, I have to support him, right? Like, and I'm going to be the one, you know, and he doesn't know how to set up a router with multi-WAN, and he doesn't know how to set up firewall rules between different LAN segments, and he, you know, like that's just, or even for that matter, set up one LAN with multiple access points. For him and most of the people in the world, a router is the same thing as a modem, is the same thing as an access point, is the same thing as a switch. So in terms of like making a product like this accessible, in some sense, it seems to me it really just has to be accessible to people. It has to be something that they can do without knowing anything, and maybe moreover being convinced that I can get this and I can make it work, and not have to know, for example, anything about, you know, web server or a SIP server or SIP provisioning or, you know, an XML pages and stuff. So I guess I mean, it may be that this is not your target market, but it seems like in some sense it could by rights be, you know, given the low cost, low entry point. But I guess I'm just wondering, like, when you guys conceive of the purchase process from the start of you know, from concept to execution, you know, like you guys have probably thought about this a hell of a lot more than I have, but like, you know, what do you see as sort of the hurdles, and how, and like, how do you make it so that this product is something that like my mom, or maybe someone slightly more technical than my mom, could at least conceive of buying and installing, you know, or is that even close to being conceivable for your target market?
That's a great question. And again, I mean, I think that, you know, from 5 years ago, that really wasn't, you know, there were definitely not NVRs in the market that could handle
Lean
it.
forward.
And today's NVR, our new GVR.
Wrong microphone.
Can you hear me now?
That's really strange. I've never seen that happen before. But yeah, we're not hearing you well enough at all. So you
not on this call where we're all telephony professionals.
Well, especially for those audio only.
Yeah, I hope that's not a Grandstream PC you've got there.
You can blame IBM.
The short answer is, in the development of our we actually spent many.
We're still not hearing.
Hang on, guys. Do us just a favor. Change seats.
Wow. I think we really screwed up Chrome's.
I have a theory about the. That's James, by the way.
Oh, is it me?
James, how many times do we have to tell you?
If you guys trade seats, I think it's something about
of his voice, which is garbled by nature. Like his. I'm sorry.
Could be. Is that better?
Yeah, I think that's going to work.
Okay.
Something about the laptop, and we've seen this before, where certain laptops they have a couple of microphones, and they use one for noise cancellation or echo cancellation, and the other one they use to pick up, and it's like the one on that side is the one it's using to pick up, and the one on the other side is not.
All right, someone is stealing your car.
And to clarify for everyone on audio, this is through a apparently terrible laptop. Definitely not any of our Grandstream phones. So this is the downside of doing the web chat. But to answer the question, I mean, the NVR, our NVR that we launched, we spent a lot of time developing the user interface so that it has the ability to be as basic understanding and the menus as clear and concise as possible. You know, I think we're definitely getting to the point as the general public becomes more technologically aware than they were. I mean, again, think back, you know, even 5 years ago when iOS and Android devices were still relatively new, and people would only know,
basic things, and now how that knowledge has kind of evolved, and the average user is now more sophisticated with technology. And again, as you kind of come down on the NVR, I think that some people would be able to do that. We're definitely not designing it, for every home user now, and obviously we have great resellers that, set up and install for businesses and for home users so they don't have to worry about it. But, I mean, from a management standpoint and from a setup standpoint, absolutely. I mean, it's getting to the point where, the user interfaces are such that most, maybe I shouldn't even say most, but many end user customers are starting to feel comfortable setting them up or at least managing them themselves once a professional kind of comes in and installs the cameras and the networking and things like that.
And let me just kind of finalize that point too. This SIP security, SIP video surveillance is definitely, a newer thing, especially on the DIY market specifically. So one of the things we've been doing over the last year, and that we're going to do a lot more of this year, is just getting out and training people, kind of raising awareness that SIP security exists, that it is truly this easy to set up, that you shouldn't be scared by web user interface, because at least the way I look at it, it's easier to set things up using a web user interface. Yes, it might be an extra step, but everything's very easily broken down into categories for you. So it's a newer thing on the market. We're getting out there, raising awareness for it, doing some trainings on it.
I think that's smart. I think that one of the things that surprised a lot of people, including me, is just how much bigger the market is when you go down. I mean, like what you've just described is like the simplification of the whole process, and so now instead of being 100 clicks, it's like 5 clicks to get it up and working, right? And I think that the thing that's been surprising me over and over and over as a technical person, as I watch the market develop in various little sectors and niches, is just how much bigger, like the market that going from like 100 clicks to 10 clicks, that's a 100-fold bigger market. But going from 5 clicks to 2 clicks is like 1,000 times the market size, and going from 2 clicks to 1 click is like a 10,000-fold increase in market, or 100,000-fold. I mean, I just love the example of the iPhone, because everything that the iPhone was beloved for, everyone on this call was doing for 7 years prior. And it's not a matter of the technology. I mean, the Edge network had been available for 3 years prior to the advent of the iPhone, and GPRS, before then. And there were apps on Palm OS and WinCE and all these mobile platforms. And so it's really just kind of, I mean, Michael's example, the drop cam, is just like, of course. It's a terrible product, and everyone will buy it. So I keep thinking and I keep thinking about the hurdles for end users, and I keep thinking about this possible mashup between the new Wi-Fi specs, like 802.11ac, which is just like a quantum leap from 5 gigahertz on 802.11n, and how that type of network topology actually works, as opposed to the other Wi-Fi technologies, which mostly don't even work. And so the mashup of that plus the big fat center of the market that is completely intimidated by even basic networking. So while we all know that there's not much difference between running a network cable to a location and a power cable to a location, most people don't know that, and they're not going to find out about it ever. So I just keep thinking, do you guys have any? So I want to ask, do you guys have any thoughts about, your product going forward? Could you make this product more accessible to more people by making it cheap like it is, but have it be 802.11ac Wi-Fi, so that Wi-Fi is a reasonable choice, and then also simultaneously make it so that it is in fact accessible to my friend with the Airbnb who wants to have surveillance, or even that business that just wants to go plug. It's on the network because Wi-Fi is the same thing as a network, is the same thing as the internet, is the same thing as the cloud, is the same thing as my Google account. For as far as they see it, of course it's not, but that's how they see the world. And so that's my question. I know that's a really long question, but
no.
That's how I have this reputation.
Pretty simple answer for you. You know, Wi-Fi cameras and cloud cameras are potentially in our roadmap going forward. So,
yeah,
basically, we're looking into that.
Let me backspin that for you, Carl, though, because I'm not a fan. And the reason why I'm not a fan is that Wi-Fi, no matter how great it is, it's not deterministic.
Yeah, but think about 802.11ac, right? I know they're all carrier sense multiple access. In that sense, you're right. But 802.11ac is different in the sense that it's a beamforming technology, and so it can. So in some sense, I don't know the degree to which this is the case. I don't know how. I haven't done any real testing to know how good the beamforming function is, but in my real-world testing of like ordinary use cases for 802.11ac Wi-Fi is that it kicks ass. I mean, like in other words, the beamforming aspect is able to to some degree isolate traffic coming from one vector from traffic coming from another vector, and so in that sense, you kind of have your own private spectrum to the degree that the echo canceling or echo realignment DSP in AC is effective.
I don't care, and it doesn't matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is that it's still a shared space. It's common infrastructure. It's a single point of failure, and it's very hard to manage. And imagine this. You've got.
Yeah, I agree with you. By the way, I would never. One of
the reasons why drop cams are such a bad idea is that people have trouble with Vonage. People have trouble with call quality for Vonage across their
right.
AT&T DSL, right? All of a sudden you're sending a couple of 2 or 3 or 4 megabit streams. Well, first of all, a lot of outbound bandwidth it doesn't support that. So, and then now you've got QoS issues, both for the video and for whatever audio you've got going on. If you've got audio going, it just makes for unnecessary complexity.
Yeah,
and I just see Wi-Fi as being another bottleneck.
I think
100%.
I think Carl's analysis.
But at least it can exist. Do you know what I mean? Like wired networks don't exist. They just don't exist for 99.9% of the world. It just doesn't exist. The internet exists. I mean, I just can't even believe how many people don't understand the world the way you and I do. I mean, I was in a conversation with a guy, in a kind of quasi-developing nation for an hour about the internet service they had there before it came to my attention that he was talking about cellular internet, and he didn't even have any concept of the idea of a local area network or a terrestrial internet link. And so much of the time when I'm talking to like ordinary people, I kind of get this glimpse into the idea that they have no distinction between like I was in this conversation with someone for a while trying to help them figure out what was wrong, and they were saying like, well, this person doesn't have Wi-Fi, but that other person does have Wi-Fi. It's just like, wait, what? Like the Wi-Fi isn't off for one person and on for another, and it came to my attention that she thinks of the internet as the same thing as Wi-Fi, and so I guess I'm just saying like.
What you're pointing out, Carl, though, is that there's a role for value-added resellers. There's a role for experts, right? And if you're a small business deploying this stuff, if you're ordering 2 drop cams, that's fine. There are no experts. There's nobody in the middle. Hopefully the website is informative enough, and it's obvious, right? But But just as Elon Musk can't put satellites into orbit with rockets made from instructions on the internet, there's a role for experts in the world, and that's what we're seeing.
Right.
And that's where the opportunity is, right? The opportunity is for some people to go around and say, hi, I'm Mr. Grandstream dealer, and I make a living helping you spec the stuff out because it's not really obvious to some people. But it's obvious enough to me, and I love it.
Yeah, right. That's why guys like you get to play around with this stuff 7 years before everybody else.
Actually, I was mentioning to David Frankel that I was doing this, and David bought a house last fall, and he came to a full stop and said, I had presumed that by this point, he thought that that this kind of residential home surveillance stuff would be just completely widespread, and it's not. And that is to a certain degree a technological failure, but it's to a larger degree a channel failure. And you know, you've got the Taluses and the Swans and the retail brand names peddling stuff that isn't really, I mean, it's cheap. That's its selling point, right? It's cheap. So, and it doesn't have to be specified because you order the box, and the box comes with 8 cameras and all the screws that you need to mount the cameras. And yeah.
Right. But I think the reason that it has failed, Michael, is not a channel failure, in my opinion. The reason that it's not widespread, I think the reason it's not widespread is because I think it's the mashup of 2 factors. One is that it's not essential, right? Heat in your house is essential. Some people consider cable TV essential, internet is essential, but surveillance is not essential. And so therefore, people have an option to not have it, so if they want it, and if the reality is, which I agree with you, as you say, if the reality is that this is the role of an integrator, the cost of an integrator is prohibitive. I mean, I could have done home automation in my home long ago, but I haven't because I'm not going to do it until I can do it myself, because I'm not going to pay some integrator just an ungodly amount of money for some marginal improvement in the quality of my life. You know, I mean, so the point is, like, I'm going to do it when I can get the time to figure it out and sort of do it. But like, if I were to do it, I might pay $4,000 or $3,000 for motion sensors and special light switches and controllers and stuff like that. Whereas if I were to pay for an integrator, which is something that my brother did, you know, he's into it $40,000 or more. And so the point is, like, paying an integrator for video, I think it's a ratio analysis of what's the benefit to the cost of paying for what Dave Frankel would call a live animal to come over to your house or come over to your business, think about your problem, and give you a solution that you either have to think about anyway because you have to manage it yourself, or something that you have to pay for ongoing support on. So I guess the point, so back to the drop cam thing, you know, that's the kind of thing. Whereas if somebody does want to bring that value add into their workflow or into their home life, you know, a really, really, really bad solution is better than no solution if it's cheap enough. You know, and so that's where I keep thinking about, if you can get marginal benefits from AC, and you can get, you know, and you can basically do what I think Grandstream is doing, which is like make it so that you just buy an NVR and you plug, you know, and you open up the app and you plug the things into the wall, you know what I mean, and which are all concepts that people have now for, you know, sort of accidentally as they have these, like, people know how to do that accidentally now because of the success of mobile phones. So now that tool, so AC, you know, apps, you know, those 2 things are now part of the common knowledge base of the 99.99%ers, and so that's where I keep thinking about, you know, like this has been a pain point for me and other people that I know, and so the reason I keep harping on this from this ease of use perspective is because I know that for a lot of people that has been the hurdle. You know, they're not going to pay for an integrator, and they don't know the difference between wired and wireless and cellular and terrestrial and all that kind of stuff, and they're never going to learn it. And so that's so the point. So the question. Go ahead.
Clearly, Carl, and there's room for somebody to make this Apple TV simple at the retail level, at retail. But above that, which is kind of where we're playing, right? We're playing one step above that. It's different, right? And with that, I would like to let these guys go and have lunch, because they've been very good about giving us an hour and a half of their time, and it's been an interesting call. And Phil, thank you for taking the time.
We enjoyed this very much. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, come on back, and feel free to. Well, Ruth is very good about sending us announcements about new stuff, but we're happy to have you. And Randy, thank you for letting me co-opt Friday.
Great call, guys. Thank you very much, and you are welcome anytime. Just keep in touch.
Will do, for sure. Thank you.
Cheers,
okay.
Guys.
Michael, we'll play some music and then we'll continue with the mature audiences.
Carl and I are going to arm wrestle after this.